Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
You know, one thing that this sport loves to do on any given Saturday is just to throw an absolute curveball for you at the 11th hour. And we certainly have those curveballs thrown to us over the course of this weekend as we're getting to the point of the offseason where I can almost use my fingers and toes in order to count down the days until the season starts. Welcome, everybody, to College Football Red Zone as we embroider ourselves into preview season, this time being some Conference USA action being talked about here on the show today. Also some thoughts on Big Ten Media Days, but we have to start things out in terms of the fallout that just hit our shores this weekend. We got, I guess, a little bit of breaking news that happened over the last 24 hours. Just a complete loss for words here. So in case you guys haven't seen as of lately, so we had this 5-for-5 like NCAA like rule came out, which like makes perfect sense to like a lot of folks, right? So it's like, okay, it's very simple. You get 5 years, you know, to play your 5 seasons, and if no matter if you get hurt or not, like it is what it is at that point. And now we just had this judge come in and say, hey, if you're a class of 2022 guy, and essentially, if as long as you did in redshirt, you can come back and play college football at the 11th hour. Guys, I've read through this quite a few times. Like, I'm a little bit shocked that this was even allowed to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see in the quote, Dan Hurley, he summed it up pretty well. It's a complete shit show. It is like, what is anybody going to do anything? Is there going to be a single? Is the NCAA going to do anything? Obviously, they can't now. Can anybody just like grab a hold of this sport and just, you know, do something that doesn't, you know, fundamentally shake everything? It's like we're going to have kids that entered the NFL draft, either made a training camp, was an undrafted free agent, something like that. They've been on NFL rosters, technically, been to NFL training camps, and then will be able to come back to college football. It's like, I don't know, man. Reed, help me out here.
I mean, the biggest thing for me is, I mean, we've seen this in college basketball go on last season with, you know, former NBA guys, you know, come back to play in college. This isn't basketball. Physically, football players that are older and have been to the NFL level are more physically adapted football players, if that makes sense. Like they're more, I'm trying to find the right word to describe it. Like they're just more physically gifted because they're older, they're stronger, they're faster than like an 18, 19-year-old kid just starting college football. So right. you have that aspect that like they're just given more opportunity because they are physically gifted more because they're older.
Right. And I mean, like, they've had more opportunities to mature their body and also their mind as well, just because they've had more reps, whether it is they've had more reps, like in a practice environment, like even if you're someone that was essentially the bench warmer for the last like 4 to 5 years, or you had some more opportunities in the weight room as well, where you had more time to really develop your physical tools. So, again, like we're talking about someone that maybe has went through like the NFL draft process. Maybe he even has the audacity to talk to a few NFL coaches, like leading up to the NFL draft as well. And so I'm looking at this whole situation, and it just really opens up the floodgates. And this was exactly what I was worried about when we saw some things go down in the college basketball landscape, when we saw some G League players, or they were on a G League roster, like be able to briefly play in college basketball. That really opened up the floodgates for everyone else. So understand there, like the judge where he was coming from, like or she was coming from. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl. That's not really important because the precedent was already set. And so unfortunately, it's hit our shores here in college football. And essentially now we have a second transfer portal window here for teams to add players onto the roster at the last second. And it really gets into, okay, like what's the fine line here in terms of who we're going to let play and who's not going to be allowed to play moving forward.
Right. And it's dystopian. It's like, as you can see on the screen, Thomas Castellanos is eyeing a return to college football. What does that mean? Does that mean he's a free agent? He's just going to go to the highest bidder and he can do that and he can enroll and take, I don't know, gardening and be able to play football for a team? It's like, I'm just waiting, and it's going to happen in the next probably 48 hours. One of these quarterbacks is going to sign with somebody. One of these players that's eyeing a return is going to sign with Florida Atlantic or something. And it's going to be like, what? I don't even understand logistically, because as a GM of a college football program, this has to frustrate you because you just spent an entire offseason game planning. You're trying to like work out the NIL, work at contract negotiations in terms of like NIL structuring. And now you have quarterbacks like Thomas Castellanos, we can all agree isn't the greatest in the world, but he could make an impact for, I don't think of a team, Kennesaw State. If he signed for $500,000 to Kennesaw State tomorrow, it's like, okay, well now they're a CSA front runner. It's like, I don't understand why now. Obviously, they had to come to some sort of agreement in terms of it being a lawsuit, but it's like the season starts in a month, and this month we'll be playing college football, and there's going to be players joining rosters that weren't even in college football a week ago. How does that make any sense? I don't know what sport we're playing.
I think if we are to allow these players coming back that haven't played in college football in at least a year, there should be no NIL involved here. Like if you're coming back to improve your draft stock, that's one thing, but to just come back to get a paycheck and then try to make the NFL and still not make it, because we all know that this guy right here is not an NFL quarterback. So, I mean, it's one thing. I think the NIL is the biggest factor here, because to Colton's point, you could just pay Thomas Castellanos a band or few and, just win a couple more games. So it obviously raises the ceiling for a couple teams that, we're pegging as like bottom feeders in their conferences.
And yeah, or even if you're a like a fringe team, for example, because I remember when this news first came out, like in our group chat, like one of the first people that I saw was brought up was like Thomas Castellanos, formerly of Boston College and Florida State, and I'm thinking about like the first team that I thought came to mind that maybe would publicly like be completely against this, but privately, try to figure out ways to improve their roster. Like I could see in Iowa of the world, like try to take advantage of this, because thinking about it, like Iowa has a pretty good football team and it's going to be a fringe team, like in the sense of, hey, they're not going to be seen as a top contender right now, but they, even with a very inexperienced quarterback, they can give a lot of the top teams in the conference a really hard time. And we saw this play out last year. You think if they add like a Thomas Castellanos, that raises the ceiling of their team. Like that has to be like conversations that's happening not only at Iowa, but there's probably a few other places that's happening at as well. And so I'm just curious to see who actually takes advantage of it, even though publicly they're going to come out against this.
North Carolina, I could definitely see take advantage of this.
This
just seems like
a lot of sense for them.
Especially based on the recent events of Lombardi, doing some shady stuff behind the scenes. I could definitely see North Carolina go after this without a doubt.
Yeah, there's definitely like Florida State could go and try and get him back too. To me, this just comes out like the NCAA. The NCAA might as well just not exist anymore. It's like the jilted ex who's like clinging on to a relationship. And it's like, don't worry, like we can still, but it's literally, that's what you should. That's what happened. The NCAA is the jilted ex that got blocked 5 years ago and still hasn't gotten over it. It's completely useless. I don't understand why we're still clinging on to them as any kind of officiant of the sport. They have no control over anything. Any court in any state can seemingly change the fabric of college sports overall at the drop of a hat, and the NCAA can do nothing. I don't know if it's going to be a government thing where the government steps in and does something, but it has to be it could be the conferences. Something has to get done, because as long as judges can just wave their hand and change everything, like with the Trinidad Chambliss thing, with the Texas Tech thing, as long as that happens, we will never be able to get anywhere in terms of like a meaningful change in the right direction in the sport. It just won't happen.
Yeah, and going back to even like the Brandon Sorsby situation, like that should have been like open case, like shut case, right? Like we have like documented evidence, right? Like of Brandon Sorsby, gambling on the sport while he was a college athlete and betting against his own team. Like that should have been open and shut. And the fact that it really took a significant amount of outcry and outpouring, like in opposition of Brandon Sorsby playing, for him to not ultimately see the field. Like that was what it took, not common sense, as you mentioned, Colton. So, I mean, we saw the slippery slope start to open up in terms of basketball. We're seeing it here on our shores here in football as well. But inevitably, there's going to be some teams that maybe don't have much to lose, like a North Carolina, that is going to take advantage of that situation, especially because North Carolina, I know, is going to try to avoid playing Billy Edwards at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna. They for sure. It was a good shout, Reed. They for sure could be a team that looks at a Castellanos or somebody else to come back and take full advantage of this ruling.
But you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and like get off of my like my old man like yelling at a cloud like moment here. We still have a great show here tonight, in spite of like everything that's going on. I mean, we still got like the Big Ten like media takeaways. We still got CUSA record predictions coming to your door here shortly. So gonna be still a really fun one to get through. But yeah, just completely nonsensical. No one's in charge of the sport right now, and until we have someone in charge of the sport, that's never going to change. But hey, we're still going to have a great show here tonight, and we had a really good media days to wrap up, I guess, this offseason, so to speak. The Big Ten, they just wrapped up their like media days like I think Thursday night, and I gotta tell you, like one of the things that I came away from in terms of Big Ten media days, thank goodness that the Big Ten and the SEC cannot agree on a playoff format. They've both won playoff format change, like many of the other conferences do, but those two are in charge of ultimately driving the ship, and them disagreeing and not coming to some kind of compromise is ironically saving this sport right now when it comes to our playoff format.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought two wrongs in that situation make a right, where it's like they both want something, they can't agree on the terms, and they're going to every length possible to make something not happen. And it's actually helping us out in the short term, at least. Who knows where we get down the road, but we're going to take advantage. As a fan, I'm going to take full advantage in my viewing of the sport, in that we're going to have the playoff format that makes the most sense at the moment still for the next at least season.
I mean, this is exactly why this is completely messed up. What PJ Fleck basically said that, oh, I can go 7-5 and I should make the playoff as like a 23 seed. Like, what happened to this wanting to be like the most exclusive thing? And hold on, I have to show Colton's response because this is perfect. If you've not heard this clip from Elko, I would go listen to it. But I mean, holistically, like, it's a mess. It's a mess between the two of them. But personally, for me, the biggest takeaway is that Cignetti is now not playing the hunted role. He's still trying to act as the underdog, which I love, even though you go 27-2 in your last 2 years. Dude's a sicko, and I love it. He might sound cringy on a microphone, but the dude wins football games, and that's all I care about.
I don't think he's like, a lot of people think it's cringe. I think the people that think it's cringe are just like SEC fans or people who hate Indiana.
Yeah,
because it's like, dude. I mean, dude's he's saying the quiet part out loud. He's talking to the SEC. He's talking to the SEC, talking about, we want our own league. We want to break away and start. It's like you're in a 3-year national championship drought and you're talking about leaving college football and starting your own league. It's like, get over your. I love Curt Cignetti. I love that he's willing to call it out. Say, hey, if we lose, we'll lose, and we'll say, hey, it was our fault. We should be better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say from the winning like totem pole, but to me, it's just the past few months with what we talked about, with what we've seen being talked about at SEC Media Days, where it's like just constant complaining and what it's like. You ran the sport for the better part of 2 decades. You had your fun. You probably did some shady things under the table, allegedly, and you won a lot. And that era is over. I mean, you could win this year. You could win next year. You couldn't win for the next 10 years. And that's just how the sport is. Like, you adapt, you adjust. You don't live off of talent, which is what they did throughout the 2010s, 2000s. And you figure out how to win. And Indiana did it with Curt Cignetti. So anybody can do it. The fact that you're upset that anybody can do it makes me think that you don't even like the sport you're coaching. It's like, obviously you want to win, but it's not about, oh, my conference didn't win the championship and, it's not going the way it used to. So let's start our own league. That pisses me off. I'm glad. Shout out Curt Cignetti for speaking his mind on that topic. I 100% agree with him. It is super annoying, and I'm glad somebody is willing to have the balls to call it out.
Yeah, and essentially like comes out as that mentality of like, you're playing EA college football, like the CPU is like doing you dirty. So instead of like finishing the game out like on a first time like roll, like you go ahead, you accidentally like unplug like the PS5, plug it back in, and then you keep doing that until you get a more desirable result. That's exactly what it sounds like. And listen, even if Curt Cignetti like did sound like a little bit corny, like in somebody's opinion, like my man's went 27-2 at Indiana, right? Like, can you imagine like saying that even a few years ago, like any head coach like in the country going 27-2 at Indiana? I mean, that's an incredibly hard stretch to pull off, even if you're at like, say, a Georgia or at an Ohio State or at an Alabama, like that's an incredibly impressive thing to do. So listen, as long as you can back it up on the field, like you could talk as crazy as you want. I don't care. I appreciate his confidence, and I mean that confidence is going to benefit his team in the long term, because they're not going to really go anywhere. They're going to be in that Big Ten championship picture once again. Yeah,
but it's like if Kirby Smart said the same exact thing, he wouldn't have gotten like any pushback because it's Kirby Smart. He's a known commodity. But since Curt Cignetti's a new guy on the block, we got to pump the brakes on him. Which I'm not, and none of us are. So,
yeah, which is crazy to think about, because at what point can we no longer consider Curt Cignetti a new commodity? I mean, like once you win a national championship, I don't care how long it's been that you've been coaching at the Power 4 level. Like, if you could come out and win a national championship and win, 3 playoff games in a row because they got the first round bye, which, by the way, they were the only team to do that in 2 years of the 12 CFP, to win multiple games.
And they were the only team with a bye to win the game.
Yeah, to win their game. Like, the bye teams are 1-7 in this 12-team like playoff field. Indiana is the only exception. So that was something that definitely stood out to me as well. One team that I'm certainly also keeping an eye out as well is USC moving forward. There's a lot of talk about the big three: Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. If USC can find their way into the playoff, like based on what he's talking about with what he's seen from his offensive line and his defensive line and scrimmage play, they got an experienced quarterback coming back in Jay Mayava too, who's a top 3 quarterback in this conference heading into this year. They can find a way and get into that playoff. They absolutely have national championship upside. And I think some folks need to recognize that too.
Kind of could make a run like Miami last year. Was a great team on paper, kind of slipped up a few times in the regular season, but they got in the dance, and you saw their full potential once they made it in the dance. So USC, I think, definitely has that capability. They have the talent, they have the weapons, they have the coaching staff necessary of making a deep run if they were to make it in the playoff. I definitely can agree with that. And if they make it in the playoff, that instantly puts their trajectory back on towards, national championship contender every year. Because look at the recruiting classes that Lincoln Riley's been able to bring in. You have a pretty solid staff. And if Gary Patterson is able to replicate what Danton Lynn did with that defense last year, like ceiling is a national championship going forward for this team, without a doubt, if they at least make it in the playoff this year, for sure.
Yeah, and you really hit the nail on the head with the Miami comparison, because we were saying the same stuff about, it's like, can Miami get over the hump and become a playoff contender? And even midway through last season, it wasn't, a certainty that was going to happen. But what they did well was they got better on the offensive line, which they'd been doing over the course of, Cristobal's tenure. But they went out and they hired Corey Heatherman, who ended up being the biggest impact hire probably of any coaching staff in the country, arguably.
Straight dog.
And then you see Miami, who struggled a bit in the regular season. USC historically has struggled on the road under Lincoln Riley. They'll probably drop a game or two, for being honest. I have them on the fringe of my playoff. I've liked this team all offseason. And it's because they get Gary Patterson, who, he's been out of the sport for a couple seasons, at least as a coordinator or head coach. And offensively last year, they were really good in the offensive line. They were really good at running the ball. They had great wide receiver talent. They had Jade Mayava, who might be a little bit overrated. I really liked him, but he was a bit turnover prone last year. Wasn't necessarily the greatest in the biggest moments, but he's a very, very good quarterback, probably a top 5 quarterback in the conference pretty easily. The biggest thing, obviously, will be the defense. If Gary Patterson can have the same impact that a Corey Heatherman had for Miami, 100% I agree with you, Reed. They could be a team who has their up and down moments throughout the regular season. When it starts to matter most, when they get perhaps a home playoff game, maybe, or once they get in the playoff, they, take some strides, upset a team to get into that quarterfinal, semifinal, and then they start to look dangerous in the final couple games because, Miami had game wreckers. USC has a couple names. They have talent. It'll be a matter of if they can develop that talent into that game-wrecking talent that Miami had, or offensively, if they can stay in stride on the offensive line and really push people up front and get the running game going against teams like Ohio State, Alabama, the teams that are going to be in the playoff. If they can do that, I 100% agree. They could be, they could make a push towards a national championship this year.
And they definitely have the capability of, if they do make the playoff, they're going to be a worthy team, like Oregon, Penn State, Washington, Ohio State, Indiana. Like, those are all playoff teams, or at least very solid teams in Big Ten play. So they're going to earn their way, without a doubt.
Yeah, and that's like the point that I was about to make as well here is if this USC team gets in, like, this team is going to be battle tested. Whatever they got to play Oregon and Washington at home. They got to make multiple cross-country road trips to play a really good Penn State team that, should be a much better coach team, like under Matt Campbell. Indiana under Kirk Cinetti, the defending national champions. You got to go play them in their building. Ohio State at home, and then UCLA should be significantly better too, with a brand new coaching staff as well. So they come out of all those games that I mentioned, they can finish 4-2. So they can take a couple of losses there. They don't have like the bad upset loss that has plagued USC in the past, like in the previous couple of years, like 10-2 with a top 15 strength of schedule. That's absolutely going to be enough for them to get in. Plus, they do have the brain recognition as well, which, whether we like it or not, like, that's going to play a role in terms of, who gets a little bit more benefit of the doubt when it comes to those final at-large spots at the end of the year.
No, 100%. And a big thing that you just talked about is the strength of schedule. If they can beat an Oregon, if they can beat an Ohio, if they can pull off some of those upsets that you talked about, it could make the difference between, if they're 9-3, if they're 10-2, if they're faced up against an LSU or an Alabama out of the SEC. Those are gonna be great resumes out of the SEC this year with the extra conference games. So if they can get those big wins and not drop like you said to UCLA or somebody who's much inferior, it's gonna help them a lot. And USC fans I know are looking at that schedule and they're like, this is do or die. Like either we come out of here 7-5 and we're looking at a new head coach next year potentially, or making the playoff. We got a good resume and we make a push. It's going to be really important with that schedule that they maximize that, so that when you're matching up with those SEC resumes, you actually have a good strength of schedule comparison.
Yeah, for sure. And then like the last thing that I wanted to point out, like from the Big Ten media days, at least like when I noticed, and this was even something that my wife noticed as well, because she was watching like the highlights with me the other day, listening to Luke Fickell like on the stand, like at Big Ten media days. I really appreciate his honesty in terms of what's went wrong, like at Wisconsin, like over the last few years. And when Luke Fickell has had the most success, he's had a dual threat quarterback. I remember when he had Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati, and that led to them having a tremendous amount of success cultivating and making the college football playoff as a G5 program, which no other G5 team has been able to be in the top 4. He's got Colton Joseph, and if he can remain healthy too, like Colton Joseph could make Wisconsin another one of those dark horse type of teams that maybe isn't in the playoff hunt or in a conference championship hunt, but Wisconsin can be a kind of like an Iowa was last year, where they were in a thorn of a lot of people's sides last fall.
Absolutely.
I also like that he pointed out, because of their injury bug, especially last year, on top of a tough schedule, he completely changed how they go about like off-season training and stuff like that. So, I mean, to your point, if Colton Joseph can stay healthy throughout the Big Ten schedule, especially, I mean, Wisconsin's definitely a team, I think, solely because of him at quarterback, can pull out some of their swing games, just solely because he might have the quarterback edge over the opposing team.
Yeah, and the biggest thing to me is like down the stretch defensively from what we saw with Wisconsin. They took a lot of big steps last year. I think if they can, be comparable to an Iowa, like Jake said, they can, cause a lot of trouble, potentially pull off an upset, whereas Iowa couldn't do that last year against teams like Oregon, USC, where they had chances to win those games. I'm not super duper confident in, Fickell, just from what we've seen. I really like Colton Joseph. He has to take some decent steps forward in terms of like read progression and, just reading defenses. I'm not sure if I necessarily trust this offensive staff to get him to a point where they can have that edge constantly at the quarterback position. They definitely will in some games, just with his legs. I mean, elite athlete. It's just a matter of if they can, parlay that, compound that with at least a serviceable passing game from Colton Joseph. They for sure, I mean, a lot of people are saying they could win 8 games this year. If that does happen, I could 100% see that. If Colton Joseph can take that step forward, I can 100% see them taking that step forward into an 8 possible win team this year.
And Luke Fickell needs it, because I genuinely believe, like, hey, if Luke Fickell does not make a bowl game in this upcoming season, we could be seeing Wisconsin looking for a new head coach at the end of the year, which I think Luke Fickell is better than maybe what his resume at Wisconsin suggests. But at the end of the day, you eventually have to come out and get some results. Otherwise, it's what's the point of like competitive spirit if that's not what it's primarily all about. But hey, we'll see if Wisconsin can take that next step. We'll see if USC could maybe surprise some people, as well as we'll see if we can see some interesting things out as we head on over to our 9th ranked conference, like according to what the CFB Redzone apparatus is. Because one thing, how I'm doing the previews for all 138 teams, those final record predictions, is at the same time I'm also doing the conference rankings. So this is not just from me and Reed, not just from Colton, but there's a couple others who couldn't be on the show here tonight that did vote on both, like, what do we think about each individual team, as well as thinking about, well, what do we think about these conferences holistically. So in case you haven't been able to read from the title of this video, we do have the CUSA coming in at number 9. Reed, on the other hand, like, is someone that is even higher than just at number 9. He has them a little bit higher. So before we go ahead and get into the record predictions for all the CUSA teams, I'm curious from your standpoint in terms of what you're seeing from the CUSA holistically heading into 2026.
I think the top half of this conference doesn't get enough credit. I mean, Kennesaw State was a 10-win team last year. Jack State was on the brink of winning that conference title against Kennesaw State. Western Kentucky has been a staple for the past few years now. I mean, Liberty's taking a little bit of a dip with Jamie Chadwell. I expect him to bounce back in a massive way this year. And then Delaware is a massive riser for me. Ryan Carty at the helm, Minicucci at quarterback. I think the Conference USA's top half at least doesn't get enough credit. And don't forget about FIU too. I think FIU doesn't get enough credit as well in this conference. There's a very competitive team, middle of the pack team in this conference. So I personally think their top half doesn't get enough credit. I think they could compete with some of the more known G6 teams that get a lot more credit. Like for instance, a New Mexico, UNLV, Hawaii, teams like that. So I think they don't get enough credit. I think they could compete with some of them on a neutral field.
Yeah, and I think also on top of that for like the CUSA, I think what hurts them too from a reputation standpoint is that it has been a little bit of a revolving door, just in terms of constantly seeing members like enter like into the league and then leave the league as well. Plus how they handle like certain types of leaving operations. I mean, we saw a whole fiasco with Louisiana Tech like exit before they went to go join the like the Sun Belt as well. So holistically, I think we're starting to see the conference stabilize, and we're starting to see it take hold. Even a Missouri State, who is probably going to be in the bottom half, like maybe not high on them this year, but there's some long-term hope for Missouri State too. So should make a very competitive conference heading into this season. But with that being said, though, let's go ahead and get right into it, though. Getting the like the old big board out now. Brody did send me his like record predictions, but I'm gonna fill that out, and you guys will see the Twitter graphic like come out like later tonight. In the meantime, though, starting off at number 10, this was a team that didn't start. Like I think only one person out of the four of us that voted on this actually had Mid Tennessee State at the bottom, but this was a consensus bottom 2 team in the conference. It is Mid Tennessee State. Big year for Derek Mason. We'll see if he can find a way to survive this upcoming season. But it's not a positive outlook for the Blue Raiders, though.
Yeah, and I definitely could see them finishing that bottom spot. I just think there's one team that's like far and away probably a little bit worse. Disrespectfully so. I know. I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of the hire they made. I think they kind of dug their own grave there. I could be wrong. Could end up with egg on my face, but I'm not super worried about it. With Middle Tennessee State, though, I think there's a little bit more upside than the other team that we'll eventually talk about, in that they do have, some playmakers on offense. They got Roman Gagliano, who, for what it's worth, wasn't, awesome last year, but didn't throw an interception. There definitely is upside. I definitely think he could blossom into, a very good quarterback in this conference, at least, which, isn't like top end of the country, but very serviceable within the CUSA. They also have some other weapons that are serviceable. DJ Taylor at running back. Let's see, wide receiver. They got Cameron Lacey coming back this year. They have talent in terms of like comparable in the conference. I don't think they'll be very good just because I don't trust Derek Mason as a developer of talent. I have them at 9, like I think Jake was alluding to. It's one spot above, so not that much higher than Brody. Obviously, I definitely see where he's coming from, but I definitely think there's one team in this conference that's a little bit worse than them this year.
Yeah, for me personally, I had Mid Tennessee State at 10. Sorry, MTSU Milkman, if you ever watch this or are watching this now. It's nothing personal against you. It's just your team, I think, is going to stink this year, to put it plain and simple. Derek Mason, I'm not a big fan of 6 and 17 going into his 3rd season. I think Gagliano could elevate the level of this team. To your point, Colton, he wasn't bad by any means, but he also isn't lighting the world on fire. O-line is inexperienced. They returned no starters from last season. They returned 6 starters holistically defensively, so the defense could, carry this team at points. But yeah, holistically, this is going to be one of the worst teams in all of the FBS, in my opinion. I have them going 2-10 overall, 1-7 in conference play. Their one win actually comes last game of the season against New Mexico State for me. So I think if Derek Mason is still held on as head coach, he doesn't have a lot to work with because they're also taking away funding from a lot of the athletic programs, which is unfortunate, but they're putting a lot of the funding into other resources that the university needs. So the football program is one of the teams that does not benefit from that resource move. So Mid Tennessee State for me is finishing last place.
Yeah, and I was on a similar wavelength than you. And I remember when Derek Mason was first hired for this Mid Tennessee program. He didn't work out at Vanderbilt, but to give Derek Mason a little bit of benefit of the doubt here, Vanderbilt is an incredibly hard place to win at pre-NIL era in the SEC, right? So him not working out there, maybe that wasn't a huge indicator of maybe he's a better coach than maybe what he was given credit for. So he understood the state of Tennessee. So when they made this hire, I had some greater hope for him. But now here we are going into year number 3. And 6-18 record. That's his record at Mid Tennessee in a much weaker conference. I think he's proven that maybe he's a solid to even good defensive mind, just maybe not an FBS head coach at the end of the day. They do have some pieces like you alluded to. Kanye Udo is a name to watch. He transferred in from Arizona State as well. So the backfield's promising. They have a few defensive pieces that they brought into the transfer portal. But again, it's just individual pieces that are good, just not necessarily the team holistically. So I'm right there with you, Reed. I also happen to have a 2-10 record with them going out and, winning a conference game, but not really very high on them. Would not be surprised if the Blue Raiders are searching for a new head coach at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I had them. Sorry, I forgot to say mine. I have them one game better at 3-9 and 2-6.
Oh, all right. So that is number 10, and now we get to go ahead and move into number 9. Now, the number 9 team in the CUSA, at least in the opinion of the group holistically. This is probably a team that I would not be shocked to see finish at or close to last place in the year. I'm just not very high on their coaching staff at the moment. It is the Sam Houston Bearcats, which what a generational fumble. A couple of years ago, this was a borderline 10-win team. They were trending upwards under Casey Keeler. He left the keys over to a Phil Longo. Let it be known, hey, this is the footprint to be able to win consistently in this conference, and just went in complete exact opposite direction. A lot for Phil Longo to prove this season.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Phil Longo. I think I've said that enough times on this show to where I don't have to get into the whole spiel again. I don't like the roster. I don't like the coaching staff. I don't like their quarterback situation, which, is ultimately what puts Middle Tennessee State above this team for me. That Middle Tennessee at least has some promise, in my opinion. If we're talking the most promising parts of this team, they have an Alton McCaskill at running back who's super experienced, heavier running back who at least has some experience in college football, coming from Arizona State. But they were just terrible last year. They were no good. They pulled off an upset. So they're capable of doing that. I just don't really trust Phil Longo or this coaching staff to, at the end of the day, build a competitive program out of this team. I really don't have a ton of hope for Sam Houston this year. I can't really say it in a good way or a promising way. I have them at 1-11, 0-8 in conference.
Yeah, piggybacking off that, not a lot to go off here because they're one of the lowest returning production teams in the country. Returned no starters offensively, no one on the offensive line, 7 starters defensively from last season, so that's at least a positive. But to your point, Colin, quarterback situation is not looking good with Landon Locke projected as a starter through the same amount of touchdowns as interceptions. This is a heavily portal-reliant team, so I have major question marks about that. Yeah, just holistically not a lot to go off of here with Phil Longo's squad. Definitely could see him being fired at the end of the season, to put it plain and simple. No offense to him as a person, just your football team is not going to be very good this year. So for me personally, I at least have him winning a conference game. I have him going 2-10 overall, 1-7 in conference play. I actually have him one spot ahead in number 9 because I have him beating Mid Tennessee State.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that I will say that could go for them this upcoming season is that I do think the offensive line could be a little bit better than maybe what's anticipated. Yes, they did lose Colt Dietrich in the transfer portal, and that's a huge loss. That's an all-conference caliber left tackle, protecting the blind side. But they did add a Josiah Chenault, though, from Kennesaw State, which I was surprised that he left a CUSA champion to join the Sam Houston team. He was an all-conference interior offensive lineman himself. So there is a world here where I think the offensive line will be okay. And I think what's also going to benefit them as well is they do play a couple of the bottom feeders at home. They play New Mexico State at home, like in mid-October. Then towards the end of the year for senior day, they do play this Mid-Tennessee State team, which we did reveal previously, also at home. So I think both of those things lead me to believe that I think they're going to be a little bit higher than what you two are saying, but by how much? Not significantly. This is a free win team for me, so I guess technically there's progress being made there, but it's the time of year where, hey, I think Phil Longo survives this season, but has to show significantly more progress going into 2027, or else, I mean, the Bearcats are going to need a new coach.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say much else that I haven't already said. It's not looking positive in my opinion. There are some talented players like Peter Costelli, for example. No, sorry, that's Middle Tennessee State. I'm looking at the wrong team.
Oh my goodness.
So wow, yeah, there's not even that amount of promise. There's legitimately no promise. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Wow.
Even me getting it wrong couldn't help this team.
Yeah, you at least have tried your best to be nice to like Sam Houston. I'm sure they appreciate. They do have a new press box, so I mean, I guess they have that going for them at the very least. I have know Sam Houston fans are.
I have a feeling we won't be getting invited there.
All right, before the Sam Houston fan base rallies up against us, I'm gonna go ahead and move us up over to number 8. Number 8 is going to be the New Mexico State Aggies this upcoming season. Third year under Tony Sanchez. They had some success in the past, under Jerry Krill, but ever since he left and he took Eli Stovers, who I think was more impactful holistically, thought he was the better football player, but just didn't get as much credit because he plays tight end versus playing the quarterback position. And also took Diego Pavia, obviously. This New Mexico State football team just hasn't been the same, and just looking at where they are at this point, I just don't think this is a program that has a ton of energy right now.
No, yeah, I could definitely see that. There is, just from a roster perspective, there is a little bit more upside than I would say the prior two teams. They bring in a Trey Hedden from Furman, who wasn't amazing at the FCS level last year, but was there's definitely some upside to be had there. I think if they can give him protection, if they can develop a run game behind him, there's a chance where this offense is good. Defensively, I mean, there's some good transfer talent sprinkled around. They bring back guys in Gabe Patterson and Brad Vizlezel. I hope that's right. Who had a decent impact for them last year. But there's not a ton of talent. There's a decent bit of experience returning. They have 2 senior linebackers that stand out to me, but there's definitely going to be better teams, at least fundamentally, in my opinion. I definitely think New Mexico State's a team we could potentially look back on at the end of the year and be like, wow, I mean, there was a decent amount of talent. There's a decent amount of experience. They end up overperforming, and that's just how it is. It's like, oh, we were just a little bit wrong about them, but just based on the fact that I think there's going to be better teams from a coaching perspective, like Jake was talking about, and from a roster perspective, I think this is a pretty fair spot. Let me take a gander. I have them at 4-8, 3-5 in conference.
Well, listen, Colton, I'm glad that you at least have a little bit of faith in this New Mexico State football team, because I was looking at them holistically, and I think we're going to be in for a really rough years, and lacrosse gets New Mexico okay. One person I am excited to watch is I love the addition of James Jones in the backfield, coming in out of Delaware State. He had over 1,000 yards from the line of scrimmage. So that's going to be a fun player to watch. They lost a lot of their primary weapons. So Donovan Volpel's gone. Gavin Harris, their top tight end, has left the team as well. They lost really impactful layers on all three levels of the defense to the transfer portal too. All of them, ironically, going to Colorado. So, like, this is a team that wasn't very good to begin with last year from a baseline perspective. Actually think that there's not as much talent, albeit some experience to work off of. They'll win the FCS game. I do think that they'll win the FCS game. I don't think that they win over any other game this year. I think this is a 1-11 football team. But you mentioned it, Colin. Like, this is like the one team that's in this bottom three that I could easily see. Like, if everything does somehow come together, they could in fact make a bowl game. Like, I do have a ceiling of 7-5 because there's a lot of competitive games on their schedule. I just don't think that they have a talent to ultimately pull it off. So, win-win team for me. It's going to be a rough year for the Aggies.
Yeah, not much to add here for me. Actually, the ceiling for this New Mexico State team is Colton's record of 4-8, 3-5 in conference play. I personally have them going 2-10, also 1-7 in conference play. I do think they beat Mercyhurst, but they finish in 8th for me. Technically a three-way tie for last because I have them beating Sam Houston, but losing to Mid-Tennessee State. One of the higher returning production teams in the country, surprisingly. They return 8 starters defensively, but only 1 starter on the offensive line, so that's a major question mark for me. Holistically, not a lot. I mean, they have some pieces defensively I think could keep them in games. Tori Gethers, Sone Apui, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nicholas Sessions, that's just going by tackles. So James Jones, I agree, is a good addition at running back. Could, potentially carry this offense at times, but holistically, not a lot to go off here for Tony Sanchez's squad. I think it's a step back from even last year. 2-10, 1-7 for me in conference play.
Yeah, and also like we mentioned, like here too, like the top half of this CUSA is certainly better than what folks give it credit for. So if you find yourself like in this like 7-10 range, like it's just going to be hard to really put together any kind of momentum, and that's just what this program needs. It's just momentum. At the end of the day, they just don't have it, and I think that shows on the field heading into this year. Could be a rough year for the Aggies heading into 26. Yeah,
I definitely think, of the bottom 3 teams, this is definitely the highest upside team on paper, just because of the pieces we've mentioned. I just think the coaching staff is what's going to hold him back holistically. I'm not a Tony Sanchez fan, honestly, but they definitely have some pieces that could outperform what we expect of this team. And, to your point, Jake, could maybe make a bowl game by chance.
Yeah, but I will say that the number 7 team that we do have on this list, though, like this number 7 team, it's kind of a different issue. I actually like this coaching staff that's been assembled here for this squad, but I don't think that there's necessarily the pieces there where they're going to be ready to compete right away. And that is going to be the Missouri State Bears coming in at number 7, like amongst our group. This Missouri State football team, man, like I really like Casey Woods. I love that the experience that he brings as an offensive coordinator. He's got playoff experience that I think is invaluable, right? As a head coach, and be able to instill that in his own program. I just think for him, it's going to take a year, for things to really fall into place, because there was a little bit of a fallout after Ryan Beard took the Coastal Carolina job, earlier in the offseason.
Yeah, this one to me is it could go either way. I have them taking a step back just because of what they lost, just because of the Ryan Beard situation. But they have talent. They have, some decent talent, coming in and returning on the offensive line. Skylar Locklear it's just a huge question mark for me, especially as a passer. 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions last year at UTEP. It is UTEP. It could have at the end of the day been a UTEP issue and not a Locklear issue, but you're betting on 15 there. There's some upside in the run game. There's some upside in the running back room. I definitely think that's probably the strongest part of this team. And Casey Woods is a great offensive mind, so they could end up, proving me wrong. I have them at my 7 spot, at 5-7, also 3-5 in conference. I have them taking a step back, but they're another team. I would not be surprised at all if they end up, coming out of the gates this year a little bit stronger in this conference. Maybe a team that overperforms a little bit to expectation, especially in this conference. Like we said, there are definite bottom feeders, like the 3 teams we talked about before, and ends up, proving us wrong and ends up finishing maybe in the top 4 or in the top half of this conference. To me, it's just, with all the turnover, with all the roster and staffing turnover, it's hard for me to confidently predict this team to finish closer to where they were last year.
Ditto to all the points you just said, Colton. Personally, for me, I have them going 2-6 in conference play, 3-9 overall. By the time they get to conference play, they're going to be battle tested. A&M, Lindenwood from the FCS level, Marshall, and SMU out of conference. So that's a gauntlet to start your season. Definitely like the upside this team going forward with Casey Woods at the helm, but holistically, it's not a lot. Again, they're one of the lowest return production teams in the entire country, let alone this conference. It's just a lot. It's a lot of portal ads. It's a lot of piecing things together. I think they definitely have pieces though to be able to be a competitive team. Like Ramon Green, I think is going to be a good addition at running back. They have some pieces on defense, like Jared Lloyd at linebacker, Christian Ford at safety. But again, that defense got picked apart from the roster of last season. So I definitely expect a step back in Casey Woods' first year, but I like the upward trajectory in his tenure going forward. So 3-9 for me overall, 2-6 conference.
Yeah, and the thing about Missouri State too, like they're one of those football teams where they actually might not be that bad. And from a talent perspective, there might not be this significant step back in comparison to last year. But I think why we're going to see like a dramatically different record than what Missouri State was able to put together last year when they made a trip to the Xbox Bowl. Shout out to Master Chief. They have the toughest strength of schedule, in my opinion, in this entire conference. Touching it up on like Texas A&M, who made the playoff last year, SMU, who made it to the nearly made it to the ACC championship game. Marshall is a team that's getting a lot of love in the Sun Belt and is a dark horse contender to win the Sun Belt East of this upcoming season. Even Lindenwood, like their FCS team that they're playing up against, like Lindenwood is a favorite to win the Ohio Valley like Big South merger and get a automatic bid to the FCS playoffs this year. So like Lindenwood isn't a complete slouch either. Plus, because, and I don't know why the CUSA does this, they have 10 teams. You would think that they would adopt a non-conference schedule, right, so that everyone can play everybody. No, they play 8 games. It's so dumb.
That would make too much sense, Jake.
This
is college football we're talking about.
Logic?
That's not
logic in this
college
sport.
Football commissioner. But they do dodge mid Tennessee, which like they're at the very bottom of this list, right? Yeah. So like they probably would love to have mid Tennessee instead of Western Kentucky on the road, or Delaware on the road, or Jacksonville State on the road. So it's primarily because of that where I think there's a systematic step back. So I have them going 3-9 as well and be a 2-6 football team, like Reed's mentioned, but like they could be a better looking, like they're going to profile better than I think what the record's going to ultimately suggest.
I agree.
But hey, now we get into maybe some dark horse contenders here that could really make some noise in the CUSA, and also like get out of the like the bottom half of this conference. Number 6 here is FIU, and I think we really started to get into this territory of teams that are gonna be fascinating and could give some teams that in the upper half a real run for their money. It's just a matter of, can they also like deal with a little bit of a tougher conference schedule heading into this season as well?
No, absolutely. And FIU is the first team on this list, apart from Missouri State last season, who, they're going to be a fun watch. Some of these other teams, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like watching college football, but, so it was tough sitting through a couple of these other teams at points last year. But FIU, I rarely turned on an FIU game and wasn't at least impressed with what they've created there. I really like Willie Simmons. I really think he's done a great job there. Pitbull, he's involved. That's it. He's involved. So it's going to be electric. It's going to be a lot of electricity in South Florida. They bring in JJ Cole, which is very interesting to me because he didn't look terrible last year at App State. Obviously, he wasn't, star-studded, but he's a giant guy. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for sure. Just looking overall at this roster, they bring in Greg Gaines from Rhode Island, who is going to be a big target for a big guy in JJ Cole. So you might see a little bit of electricity there. There's not a ton of great returning production on this roster, apart from some on the offensive line that's decent, some of the linebacker core that's decent. But overall, I think we can say pretty confidently that FIU is going to be a team that's going to be in the mix every single year, like we were alluding to, like before we got into these predictions. I just think FIU is a team we can confidently say is going to at least be towards the middle. I think we actually have them at their floor. I think they're going to be in the bowl eligible range. This is where I have them in mind as well. I have them at 6-6, 4-4 in conference. Another team that could sneak up towards the top if a couple things go their way. If JJ Cole, for instance, ends up working out better than we might predict. But just from a talent and coaching perspective, I don't think they're quite as good as a lot of the teams we're going to have above them. But that doesn't mean much in this conference. I think it's pretty close once you start eking up into this top 6, top 5. So like I've said a couple times, they could end up sneaking up towards the top, maybe in the top 4 or 3 come season's end.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Colton, as well. I think this is really the first team where you could look at as, hey, I think at their ceiling, I think there is a realistic possibility for them to make it to the CUSA championship game at the end of the year. I think their ceiling is personally like an 8-4 like type of season. 2 really big games for them. Their road games against Jacksonville State and the road game against Delaware late in the season as well. I think those 2 games, really decide like whether FIU plays for a conference title when we get into the month of December, or maybe they go to one of these early December, like mid-December Bahama Bowl, or like type of like venues at the end of the year. They do have to replace one of the best defensive linemen in this conference. Zion Chapman is no longer here. He transfers to Minnesota. He was the vocal point of that defense last year. But I do think that if Kenan Simmons can continue to have the type of ability that he had last year, where he was an all-conference nominee and he is back, this secondary, I think, is really going to shine. Shamir Sterling is back. Leslie Miller is transferring in from South Alabama as well. Like, he was a really quality tackler, like out in the secondary as well, which I think is, it certainly doesn't hurt. Like having willing tacklers in the secondary too. So I also had 6-6, but this is one of the first teams that I had where, I can certainly acknowledge, hey, there is a viable path for the FIU Panthers to make it to the CUSA championship if things break well, such as a JJ Cole being able to replicate what he did at App State and do that for a full season, for example.
Guys,
this
is the first one we're all aligned on.
Oh my goodness.
How about that?
That doesn't happen often.
It
For
does.
those listening at home, we get in fights in the group chat. Okay, this is rare. This is a rarity.
Yeah, mainly from the P4 jabroni. So I'm normally the one that starts these arguments. 6-6, 4-4 for me for FIU. I think the biggest strength of this team, honestly, is going to be that offensive line. They don't return a ton of production, but they do return 4 players that got starting time last year. And it's a mix of portal ads on the offensive line. So I think that's going to be a massive plus for JJ Cole, who I think could be a very solid quarterback. Again, not going to light the world on fire by any means, not going to be as high of a level as some of the other quarterbacks of these higher echelon teams in this conference, but I think it can definitely be serviceable. Greg Gaines, as we point out, is going to be a massive weapon. I think they have enough returning production defensively to be a very competitive team. So Josiah Taylor, Shamir Sterling, as we've all pointed out, Wesley Miller was a transfer addition coming in. So I definitely think this FIU team has the making of being a very competitive team and potentially an outside chance at the conference championship. I definitely agree with that. And Willie Simmons, I think, has done a fantastic job so far, and only his first season, but to be able to take him to a bowl game, win that bowl game, is definitely a plus. And I mean, one of the best transfer additions in the entire country, Brayshawn Littlejohn, added to the defense, all name team. Shout out to Colton. But yeah, FIU, we're all aligned here. Middle of the pack for me, 6-6, 4-4.
And the thing about FIU, I think, like, if you're looking at them from a long-term perspective, like, they are truly a sleeping giant in this conference. Like, you think about where they're situated at, like, in that Miami area, which is already a talent-rich state. Like, that's one of the most talent-rich areas in the state of Florida, right? So the fact that FIU hasn't been consistently good just has let me know that, hey, like, realistically, outside of like a blipper or two, like, they never had the right coach in place. If Willie Simmons is that right guy, and I think what we've seen early on could in fact be the case, like, FIU can become very dangerous in the CUSA and be up there with the Liberties or Western Kentucky, who's been consistently, a very good team in this conference as well. So FIU is a team to definitely keep an eye on long term as well.
Absolutely.
But now we get into the top 5 where things get really interesting here. Last year, this team made it to the CUSA title game. 2 years ago, they won it. But according to our group, not going to make it back to the CUSA title game. It is the Jacksonville State Gamecocks coming in at number 5. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think about Jacksonville State already showing up here in the top 5. I think some of it does have to do with, like, they did lose Cam Cook, who was one of the most impactful players in this conference last year, alongside some major, not turmoil, but there was some change in churn. Like, it could be a little bit of a retooling year for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, that's the biggest reason I'm a little bit lower on them than last year, just because they do lose that production like you're talking about. I have them one spot higher, and it's really, I think they're probably a championship quality roster again, and a championship quality staff as well. The biggest thing for me is just the tiebreakers. Once we get into this top 5, I think this is going to be a neck and neck conference all the way. And to me, I have them finishing a spot higher. It's just, I mean, can Caden Creel be as efficient, or more efficient as a passer, first of all, but as efficient as a runner without having Cam Cook as, another option running the ball? Can the defense, take strides and finish towards the top of this conference? I think that would also help, once again, a ton if they can do that. To me, it's hard for me to necessarily think or predict that this team will finish in the championship game again. One, because I think the top half of this conference, like I said, is going to be neck and neck. They're all similar quality and similar in terms of staffing as well. When you lose a playmaker like that, who's probably, in all honesty, the best running back, maybe top 2 if you're being a little bit less generous than me, but in my opinion, the best running back in Cam Cook, can you just replace that? Are you going to take a step back in the running game? And I think if they do, that would honestly be pretty detrimental for this team, because they were one of the highest volume rushing attacks last year. Obviously, one of the most efficient running attacks in the group of 6. It'll be tough. I think they can do it. They did it last season with Cam Cook, but it'll be tough, especially if they can't repeat that level of production. It could affect Caden Creel as well, who was amazing last year. That's essentially it for me. I have them taking a slight step back. Let me see their record. 8-4, 5-3 is what I have them.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing for this team, aside from losing Cam Cook, is they also lost their offensive coordinator. Clint Trickett took the job at Maryland. So how do you replicate that great rushing success with the new offensive coordinator? That's a question mark for me. Does Caden Creel take a step forward in his arm? I mean, we saw him be a fantastic athlete with his legs, but can he take a step forward in his downfield passing? That's a question mark for me. Offensive line added 3 starters from the FCS level. So, I mean, kind of putting together a unit from, the FCS ranks could be a challenge potentially. defensively, I think they got some good pieces. Like Rob Billings comes in from Clemson, who's a power forward level, player. So I think that's going to be a good addition in the secondary. Biggest thing is can Caden Creel take a step forward with his arm for me. I also think that offensive coordinator change is going to, have to take a step back for this team holistically. So I have them finishing 4th as well, Colton, but I have them at 6-2 in conference play, 9-3 overall.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier with like many of these like upper echelon teams in the like the CUSA being on a like a similar level. What I will say about Jacksonville State and kind of what did it for me is that it really came down to scheduling luck, straight from the like the CUSA league office. They have a really interesting non-conference schedule here. They play North Dakota State in week number 0, which that's going to be an incredibly fun game. Even the kid agrees with me here as well. You get Ohio on the road. That's going to be a fun game as well with John Husted. Georgia Southern at home to round out your non-conference. Like, there's going to be some really fun games that Jacksonville State is going to play, like in the month of September. On the road, though, this is what really did it for me and why I don't think they're going to get back to the CUSA championship. They got to play Kennesaw State on the road. That's the defending conference champs. They also have to play Western Kentucky on the road, which we think is a really good football team here as well. On top of that, they have Delaware on the road with their number 1 quarterback, like Nick Minicucci, or at least many of us think like Nick Minicucci is the number 1 quarterback in this conference. And then, yes, you have to go play New Mexico State on the road, which none of us really have a ton of belief here, as you can see. But at the same time, that's a cross-country road trip that you have to make. Like that's not an easy road straight. So for those reasons, that's why I didn't have them going to the CUSA championship either. So this is the type of team where I think is like a 7-5 type of team with a 5-3 conference record at the end of the year.
Yeah, we're all kind of in a similar range. It just really depends on how you think, like Jake said, the road slate kind of shakes out. I have them, I think, winning. I can take a look. I don't know why I'm guessing. I have them probably taking a couple of those games, but ultimately not being able to be as good in conference as they were last year. We're all saying the same thing essentially. It's like we trust this team. This team's going to be built well. It's just a matter of can they replicate it with what they lose, both on the coaching staff and on the roster.
But I think we also have some built-in trust like this particular program that we have coming up as well after what they were able to pull off in their FBS debut. Because number 4 is going to be the Delaware Blue Hens, led by Nick Minicucci, led by Ryan Carty, in the second year of his like FBS transition with the Blue Hens. Definitely like the real dark horse team, and there was a little love from the like the CFB Redzone apparatus. One of us did have Delaware ultimately playing in the CUSA championship at the end of the year.
You want to reveal who that is?
Yes, soy. I mean, to me, this is just the best built roster to win this year. Like you said, Nick Minicucci to me is easily the best quarterback in this conference. I know we like Caden Creel. To me, there's questions with his arm, at least more questions than there are with Nick Minicucci. Offensively, I don't really see any clear weaknesses. You could argue offensive line, but I think they do well in the portal in that aspect. At tackle, I think they're fine. In the interior, I think they're fine at the very least. Defensively, I think they're just as strong. I don't know if they have necessarily a stud standout player on the defensive side. I really like the safety KTC CA in terms of like what he brings to the table in the run support aspect. I think he's an underrated playmaker in that regard. To me, this is easily the best roster. It's just a matter of can they take a step forward as a staff, and I think that's for sure possible. They didn't do a bad job at all last season, in their first season at the FBS level. I think this is a team who's bound to take a step forward. And like I said, it's not like they're clear, far and ahead, better than everybody else in this conference. I don't even have them at number 1. I have them at number 2. Let's take a look. I have them at 8-4, 6-2 in conference. And it's just another one of those things where it's going to be a logjam towards the top. There's not going to be, in my opinion at least, a clear, definitive number one team that's just way better than everybody else. To me, they're going to be good enough to win a lot of their games, win a couple of those games on the road, and ultimately through tiebreakers and whatnot, end up in the CUSA championship game.
For me, with Delaware, I have them finishing 5th, 6-6 overall, 4-4 in conference play, and it's nothing to their, personal demise. It's kind of, I'm just higher on teams above them personally. I mean, to your point, Colin, a really good returning production team, and they returned 13 starters overall, 3 starters on the offensive line. They returned Minicucci. They returned Silver and Ellison in the backfield. Sean Wilson at receiver, who is nearly a 900-yard receiver for them. So the biggest question for me with this team is actually the defense, because their times last season, their defense was kind of shaky. So holistically, can that defense be steady throughout the entire season? The interior of the defensive line is a question mark for me. While their secondary and their linebackers all have experience, they kind of, to my previous point, they kind of got torched at times last season. So, I mean, that's the biggest question mark for me, is can they be stable throughout the entire season? And can that coaching staff, elevate this team to be a conference championship competing team, which they definitely have that ceiling. I just think holistically, there's teams I think I'm higher on in the long run going forward this season.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing that I'm looking at with this like Delaware team as well is I actually think that this team is obviously going to be better than what it was last year, but their schedule is also going to be a little bit more difficult than what they had to deal with last season as well. I have Delaware as really the toughest schedule in this conference outside of Western Kentucky, who has an obvious gauntlet of Indiana and Georgia, as well as Missouri State as well, as that team that they have like an underrated like strength of schedule as well, from not only what they got to deal with in non-conference play, but in conference play as well. They do have that working with them. So I have them as a 7-5 team yet again, but again, it's just one of those teams that I think profiles a little bit better than your typical 7-5 team in the CUSA. I do think that they finish ahead of Jacksonville State, because as one of the tiebreakers in this conference, I do have Delaware beating Jacksonville State at the end of the season. So that's why I would have Delaware ahead of Jacksonville State, because I do think that head-to-head does ultimately come into play for the Delaware Blue Hens, and that'll allow them to finish in the top 4 ultimately, which is exactly where I have them, as number 4 team in the CUSA based on preseason order of finish.
Yeah, there's 2 road tests in the middle of that conference schedule I think are going to be tough, at Western Kentucky and at Kennesaw. And then you also have to make the cross-country trip to New Mexico State in the back half of the season, which is going to be tough. So that, I mean, personally, there's some games on that conference schedule I think could be tough for the Blue Hens in the long run. So again, 6-6, 4-4 for me. But definitely Ryan Carty has this team going on a well, oiled machine going forward, championship level contender while he's at the helm for sure.
Yeah, and you could definitely argue that Delaware is going to have a, I guess, more successful and seamless transition to the FBS than, say, like a Sam Houston, like, for example, where, besides that 10-win season under Casey Heeler, they really haven't done much either. But one of the tough games that Delaware does have on their schedule is that road game that you mentioned like earlier, and it is a top 3 team in this conference coming into this year. That's going to be the Kennesaw State Owls, coming in at number 3 here, defending CUSA champions. You're number 2 under Jerry Mack. Very curious to see what that encore trip ends up being for Kennesaw State under Jerry Mack. But Colin, you weren't necessarily as high on the the Kennesaw State Owls as maybe what we were like consensually. So I am very curious to hear like what you're seeing on this Kennesaw State team that maybe you're just not as sold on as the rest of the group.
Yeah, to me, and this one's I've been going back and forth on this one so often throughout this off season, because if you think about it, Kennesaw State's kind of the Indiana of the G6. Like, they came out and without really any anybody really believing in them. They went out and they won their conference, which is a far cry from what Indiana did. But in terms of G6, leveling down, sorry, that sounds disrespectful, but it is what it is. They made an immaculate turnaround very, very quickly under Jerry Mack. That gives me a ton of confidence in this coaching staff because at the end of the day, they did upgrade in terms of talent, but it's still not like uber talented in terms of just pure roster. My biggest hangup specifically for this team that I wouldn't have comparatively for an Indiana is the quarterback situation is just so tough for me, and not just the quarterback situation because, Ricky Collins still has upside. I think he's a little bit underrated as a passer, obviously not a great decision maker, which is ultimately his biggest flaw. It really held him back at Syracuse from, competing consistently as like a hopeful starter that, could guide them through the Steve Angelilis time that they spent there. I don't think he's awful, but to me, the protection that he's going to have at tackle doesn't give me a ton of hope. You have two returning tackles from last season, two guys that transferred in, didn't play amazing at tackle, weren't the greatest at protecting the quarterback, but they had, mobile quarterbacks in Amari Odom and I forget the other one's name. If you guys remember, shout it out. But they had, I think
it was like Dexter, Williams.
Yeah,
I think
yes.
that was the day one starter. I remember him playing in the Wake Forest game.
Yeah, and they had some, the athletes at quarterback who could evade pressure, and they had a great rushing attack. But to me, I don't know if Ricky Collins is quite the athlete that either of them were. I think he might be a little bit better of a pure arm talent. But to me, the pairing of, what I think could end up being a bleak pass protection unit, as well as a guy who hasn't been known to make the greatest decisions at quarterback, it really keeps me from saying that they're going to compete towards where they were last year. I have them taking a decent step back in year 2 with Jerry Mack at 7-5 and 5-3 in conference.
Yeah, and I definitely understand where you're coming from because we saw Ricky Collins play at Syracuse, right? In the light of Steve Angeli got hurt, and Syracuse in the month of October and into November, they became a big dumpster fire, and Ricky Collins' play was a major reason for that, right? So they had that to navigate, and then like you mentioned as well with that offensive line, losing Josiah Chenal to the transfer portal and Brandon Best to East Carolina. Those were all conference offensive linemen. Those are not like your typical starters by any means either. So that is something that I am concerned about. What I will say though, I do think it's going to have a couple weapons to throw the ball to. I really like the additions of Devon Slaughter and Keon Davis, from the FCS/Division II ranks. I think their running back in their backfield is going to be a fun watch too, with Trell Murrell and Tristan Morgan coming back. And Jerry Mack, to me right now, I think is the best head coach in the CUSA. I think he's earned that distinction with the 1-year turnaround that he's done at Kennesaw State, being a complete afterthought with the smallest stadium in the FBS to a conference champion. So I do give him some more benefit of the doubt because of that. I do think there's a slight step back though. 8-4 with a 6-2 conference record, but I don't see them playing in the conference championship. They miss out due to losing some critical games late. They got to beat either Liberty or Western Kentucky, and I just don't see them beating either team, at least not this year.
So I am actually the highest on Kennesaw State of all three of us. I have 7-1 in conference play, 9-3 overall.
Ooh.
I don't think this team takes as far of a step back as what you guys project. I think Jerry Mack is one of the more underrated coaches in the G6 level. And his name is escaping me. Odom, the quarterback last year. His first name is escaping me. But
Amari?
Yes, thank you. He wasn't even projected the starter last year for this Kennesaw State team, was thrusted in the middle of the season and didn't miss a beat, took him to a conference championship. So my opinion is if he was able to do that with Amari Odom last year, what makes, in my opinion, I think he can replicate that with Ricky Collins. I definitely think he has that upside of not reaching a level of what Amari Odom did last year because he was fantastic, but I definitely think he could be a very serviceable quarterback, and I think the weapons around him are very good. Braden Monroe, Devon Slaughter, with Terrell Morrell, as you pointed out, Jake, at running back. And this defense, I think, is going to be a solid unit, although I have questions in the secondary holistically. And offensively, I think it's going to be a plug-and-play situation on their offensive line. I mean, they have a good amount of returning snaps, top 20 in the country, actually, in returning snaps on the offensive line. But as Colton pointed out, some patchwork through the transfer portal. So they retain both coordinators, which I think is a plus. So holistically, I don't think this team takes as far of a step back, but I do have them also missing the conference championship game just based on tiebreakers. But 9-3, 7-1 in conference play, and this is where my personal logjam starts at the top.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised that I didn't have at least as bad of a long jam in the CUSA as I did when we did our MAC record prediction and preview, because I had 4 teams legitimately tied for 2 spots, and it was a complete cluster. For me this time around, I didn't actually have that much of a cluster to work through, even though 5 through 1 I think could be somewhat interchangeable depending on how you feel or what you're looking at. Number 1 and number 2 was actually the closest that we've seen so far in us doing these rankings as a collective group, because our number 2 team did receive 2 first place votes, i.e. there was 2 of us that did actually think that this team is going to win the CUSA this upcoming season. And that team did end up being the Liberty Flames. They did end up coming in second place for the CUSA. So just looking at the group holistically, Liberty is projected to at least make it to the CUSA title game. But what it came down to is that Liberty seems like they might have a lower floor than what ultimately was our number 1 team.
So Colton thinks that Delaware on paper has the best roster to compete. For me, this is the best roster to be able to compete. And to my point, as I alluded to when we first started this, I definitely think Liberty bouncing back from an abysmal season last year, and sorry to remind you, Jake, of those traumas you had last season. Yeah, I think they bounce back. I have them finishing top based on tiebreakers. I have them playing in this conference championship game. I am kind of still deciding of the top 2 teams who I think is going to win the conference. But for me personally, 7-1 in conference play, 10-2 overall for this Liberty team. Their losses for me are James Madison to open up the season out of conference, and I think they lose the Kennesaw State game. But holistically, Ethan Vasquez is the biggest question mark on this team for me. If he can at least be serviceable. They also have Deshaun Purdy who comes in. So nothing is set in stone at a quarterback perspective right now. But I think if either of them could just be serviceable, because I really like the weapons around him. Teron Kelman, Justin Marshall coming in at running back, Rashawn Cunningham at receiver. And defensively, I think they have enough return production to be a really solid unit, whole things considered. And yeah, 6 starters returning. Again, on the offensive line, you guys know that's a big thing for me. They returned 4 starters. So just having continuity there with Aaron Fenimore, Joep Engbers, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, both solid center guard combos. So holistically, I think Jamie Chadwell has proven to be a very solid head coach in his own right, and I think he rights the ship and gets the Flames back on track. And one of the easier out-of-conference schedules, James Madison, Gardner-Webb, Ball State, and Coastal Carolina. So holistically, this is a Liberty team I think gets back on track and plays in the conference championship.
To me, we said the biggest issue with Liberty for me, like Reed talked about, quarterback, it's tough. Yes, Liberty is on paper the most talented roster in this conference. They were last year. They're the easiest schedule on paper in this conference and one of the easiest schedules overall in the sport at the FBS level. They were last year, and they went 4-8. My biggest thing is I haven't lost faith in Jamie Chadwell. but that's coaching. And I think they've made necessary adjustments to take a step forward. But when you have a three-way battle, like the current projected starter is going to be Ethan Vasco naturally coming back. I think Jalen Henderson's probably going to get burned this year. I think he offers the most upside, in one area. I think with his legs, he can impact the game. That's my hot take is I don't think Ethan Vasco finishes the year for one reason or another. If it's passing the ball ineffectively again, like I said, they have made necessary adjustments for me to believe that they will take a step forward. Most importantly, I think the running game will get massively, massively better, both in terms of pure, running back talent. They bring in Teron Kelman, Justin Marshall, and Kanye Udo out of the transfer portal this year. They also bring in Jalen Coleman, or they don't bring him in, but they return him. Was a high school, I think he was a freshman last year. And on the offensive line, they're going to be good at run scheming. They weren't awful last year, but I think they'll take a step forward. To me, it's just like if you're going to have the best roster in the conference far and away, honestly, and the easiest schedule, and you're going to end up 4-8, to me that screams there's something not quite clicking at the top. Whether they've improved that drastically enough to finish towards the top again, which I have them at 3. It's not like I have them at 8. Whether they have that to, get back to where they were a few years ago, I guess we'll wait and see. To me, it's kind of a case in point to where you can't just hoard talent if you're one of these teams anymore. It's not a Hugh Freeze led team where they can just, stockpile talent, like I said, and win this conference perennially. It's evening out more across the country. It's evening out a lot more across these conferences. And to me, it's just not going to get it done with all that, with just having that much talent. That being said, I do have them 7-5, 5-3. Like I said, it's not bad. I have them finishing third. To me, I'm not going to be confident in any team with that disparity in talent and schedule. If you're going to go 4-8, I'm not going to be confident in you the following season, really, no matter how it goes.
Listen, last year I went on my own YouTube channel. I was doing CUSA previews. I looked in that webcam that's over on the left-hand corner of my screen. It was a different monitor at the time. And I looked people in the mirror and I said, Liberty is going to be your representative in the college football playoff in 2025. And I would be the first to admit that was one of the biggest misses that I've had over the course of the entirety of last season, was that take in terms of having Liberty in the college football playoff. But I look at this team going into this year. I really like their head coach. I still think that this is one of the best coaches in the G6. I still believe, wholeheartedly, the talent and the resources that they have available is on another level than most of the teams in this conference, even a Western Kentucky, who's proven themselves to be a very consistent winner at the same time. And the strength of schedule does allow them to bounce back. Even the James Madison game, which I think is a game that they probably will lose, that's not completely outside of the realm of possibility that they could win that game too, because James Madison is dealing with a lot of changes. They have a brand new head coach. There's a lot of new faces on that roster as well. And so I'm looking at this team coaching staff. I'm looking at this roster. I'm looking at the resources that they have, and I'm ready to be hurt again. I'm ready to be hurt by this Liberty football team. So that 7-5 record that you had, that's my floor for them. I think that should be a worst case scenario for Liberty football in the 2026 season. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It is what it is. I think with what they have, though, if they can figure things out with the quarterback, if they get even decent quarterback play, I don't even need you to be a superstar at quarterback. The rest of the roster is there. This is an 11-1 football team. And for me, this is my pick to win the CUSA ultimately. But again, Jamie Chadwell has more resources than many of these other programs. At the same time, there's no excuses. They have to be much better than last year. And he'll be the first one to tell you that. That's the first thing he said at CUSA Media Days when they had it. They have to be better. Last year was unacceptable. And I think the changes that they make end up working out extremely effectively.
I disagree.
That's completely fair.
Yeah, I'm not confident in the quarterback room overall. Like I said, I think I think you're going to have Henderson finishing out the year. I don't know if Vasco is going to take that much of a step forward. Sub 60% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. To me, if you're dealing with a quarterback situation, kind of like how Kennesaw State was, but Kennesaw State was very, very good in other areas, it would have to mean that your ground game is far and away the best in the conference, or your defense is far and away the best in the conference, which could happen. We can talk about talent all day. You're not going to have any other team that matches up well in this conference from a talent perspective, but it was the same exact thing last year. I mean, that's really it. When a team underperforms that drastically from a talent perspective, from a schedule perspective, and you go 4-8, I mean, yeah, we can be optimistic based on the talent, but it's just going to be, you're going to have to prove it at that point.
Yeah, that's that, and that is completely fair if they end up falling. But I think there was also such this confluence of events that led them to fail as spectacularly as they did. But I kind of look at it as kind of like the same realm as Clemson. You know, like Clemson was seen as this national title contender. They fell flat on their faces as well. They are able to make some wholesale changes like on their coaching staff, and the outlook for Clemson is at least better for them than maybe what it was at the end of last year. So I'm kind of looking at it from that lens. I'm actually not even the like the highest on Liberty. Brody, who didn't join us on the show, he actually has them going undefeated.
No, that's not happening.
No.
So I just wanted to like to throw it out there. Like, listen, like you think I'm crazy. Like Brody is right there with me, locking arms.
Too many swing games on that schedule. I mean, literally the last 3 teams we talked about are all swing games, and you have James Madison out of conference. Like, yeah.
But what is going to benefit them, and Colton mentioned this as well, they do have the 137th ranked strength of schedule. At least, like for me personally, it's the second easiest schedule in the country. The only one that has a worse schedule than Liberty is UMass. That's because UMass somehow has 2 FCS opponents, right? So that's the like the one thing that's hoping Liberty not be at the very bottom. But hey, we're gonna have a few months here to be able to figure all of this out. Like, to see who ends up being right here. But number one, I think we're all going to be on the same page here, at least in terms of this team being in the hunt. Whether you voted for them to be the CUSA champion or not, like they'll likely be playing in the conference championship game. It is the Hilltoppers of Western Kentucky who did finish as our favorite to win the CUSA at the end of the season.
Yeah, to me, this is a safe pick. They're gonna be good every single year. I'm not necessarily like super confident by any stretch of the imagination. I have them going 8-4, 6-2 in conference. I mean, they're proven. They're gonna come in my opinion, with maybe a little bit better of a quarterback room than Liberty. Definitely not the best quarterback room in this conference, but Tisdale and Brock Glenn at least give me a little bit of hope compared to Vasco and some of the other guys in the Liberty room. They bring in AJ Allen out of the transfer portal. They bring in Caleb Hicks at running back. They bring back Jaden McGill from last season, who didn't share a lot of snaps last year, but is talented and is coming back. He was an FCS guy last year. They also bring back a lot of talent on the offensive line. Specifically, we have okay. Here's the thing. This is the CUSA. Western Kentucky's been able to win at a consistent level. I'm not super confident in any of these teams. To me, it's just when you're going to win as consistently as Western Kentucky has and not have down years like a Liberty, I'm going to be more confident in you overall. They're not the team I'm most confident in, but through tiebreakers and whatnot, I have them finishing first overall at 8-4, like I said.
Yeah, and I will say this about Western Kentucky. They're definitely going to be battle tested, Georgia and Indiana. Like, those are 2 teams that are going to either, if not make the CFP, like they're going to be very close to making the college football playoff, like even in a worst case scenario. And even Nevada is not very highly looked upon, but that's a cross-country road trip to start your season as well. So like Nevada could be a little bit of a tricky game here. But beyond that, I mean, I feel like that Western Kentucky, what they do have is that they do have a consistent like coaching staff. Like Tyson Holden, like is entering his 8th season. He's won like on average of like about 8 to 9 games a year or so, like a consistent winner that just hasn't had like a ton of breakout season, like so to speak. And also at the same time, like this Western Kentucky team, like they do have the benefit in terms of they have some very manageable road games for the most part. New Mexico State, Sam Houston, Mid Tennessee, like those are their road games, right? We're not very high on any of those teams that we talked about. And it's a team that I think is a good football team to begin with, but they also have the benefit of a very good scheduling break. What I think is going to decide who ultimately ends up winning the CUSA. They have that Liberty game at the end of the year. It's their 11th game of the season. It's at Liberty. That game, I think, ultimately is going to decide who hosts the CUSA championship game. Is it going to be Liberty or is it going to be Western Kentucky? That game is going to have the huge advantage of having an extra home game for that conference championship because the CUSA, it's whoever has the best record gets to host. So whoever ends up winning that is going to have a tremendous advantage when we get into December and not having to travel on the road. So, you know, I really have a tremendous trust in their coaching staff. I have a 9-3 like record for Western Kentucky. I do think they go 7-1. So it wasn't my pick to win the CUSA, but I do have them playing in the CUSA title game. It was the most split that we had thus far. Very divided room in terms of who we think was going to win this conference for sure.
Yeah, and I'm aligned with you record-wise, Jake. 9-3, 7-1 in conference play. I think a thing for Western Kentucky that isn't being discussed a lot around them is they have 2 new coordinators in the building, or leading both sides of the ball. So that's a question mark for me. To Colton's point, the offensive line is a question mark because they only returned 1 starter, but they add 8 portal additions, and 3 of them were starters at their previous school. So could be a solid offensive line. The defensive line has a lot of experience with playing time, but not a lot of proven production with that playing time. So that's going to be another question mark for me. But this on paper could potentially be the best weaponry around the quarterback. Potentially. I mean, the running back, I might give an edge to Liberty in that sense with that room. But I mean, I think the receiving group for this Western Kentucky team could potentially be the best in this conference. Jay Rockwell, Katie Hutchinson, Nigel Johnson, Cameron Flowers, excuse me. So it's, I mean, can the quarterback pan out for those weapons? I mean, that's the biggest question mark for me. But Western Kentucky has proven over the last few years with Tyson Helton at the helm that this is a very competitive team by any stretch of the imagination. So Western Kentucky, I definitely think, is going to be in this conversation to be in the conference title game for me personally.
Yeah, for sure. And don't sleep on Sincere Baines either via like the transfer out of Maine. Like that's someone that, you know, was a good running back for the Maine Black Bears in the transfer portal and was also a solid like receiver out of the backfield as well. So that there's some weapons here for this quarterback position to work from. It's just, you know, can you not piss down your leg is essentially what it barrels down to. They have a good coaching staff. I think organizationally, I would lean towards Western Kentucky right now over Liberty. I think Western Kentucky is a better organization too. You know, so we'll see if Western Kentucky can finally get to that mountaintop because they haven't won the CUSA in quite some time. Finally, like get that CUSA title that they haven't really done in Tyson Helton's tenure, at least not yet anyways. But hey, before we wrap up, as we are able to completely fill out this screen with all 10 CUSA teams, you know, what was in terms of what kind of surprised you the most in terms of like who you thought maybe a little higher or a little bit lower than what you originally expected?
Brody having Liberty going undefeated is questionable. Colton, just looking at Colton's personally, Kennesaw State, I mean, because you and I are a little higher on Kennesaw State, and I just don't think a Jerry Mack led team falls off that far personally, but that's just for me.
I think Jacksonville State being, I mean, it makes sense. None of us had them like super high, but I mean, it's close. It's going to be. I was surprised you guys weren't a little bit higher than on them than I was. Even I had them finishing 4th, which isn't that much further. I mean, I would say Liberty. The hype on Liberty. With I mean, I don't I don't know how you go back to the well on that one.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Jacksonville State is that so when we were like putting out our like order of finish, like getting those like the point system together, like Delaware and Jacksonville State actually did have the same number of points, right? When it comes to putting this order of finish along our group. What I ultimately did as Mr. CEO himself is I did use my ballot as a tiebreaker. So I did have Delaware ahead of Jacksonville State, so that's why Delaware got the nod. But yeah, like Jacksonville State was probably the most consistent. Like they were in the 4th or at least like for me, like the 5th place range. Just Delaware had some more upside, like such as like UConn, for example, had them playing in the conference championship that helped Delaware distinguish itself a little bit more too.
Yeah, I think you guys are sleeping a little bit on the old Blue Hens. Just a little bit.
No, I mean, they definitely have that conference championship upside for sure. It's a matter of can they navigate that tougher schedule because they did have an easier schedule last season, so it could be a team that maybe is like your average 8-4, 9-3 team. Just their record may not fully reflect that because the biggest lie told in all of sports is you are what your record says you are, which is simply not the case sometimes.
Fair enough.
But hey, with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in here. It's been an incredible show. We got some more like content coming your way. We're still going to give you some more of these previews throughout the rest of August before we get into kickoff week. One note though, is that for like the next few shows, I am going to be on family vacation. So whether I'm going to be like on the show or not, whether Reed's running it or whether it's maybe a little bit more of a personal recording from me, that is TBD. But with that being said, regardless of whether I'm here on the show or not, hopefully you guys had an incredible Sunday. Thank you for tuning into the first Sunday show. This is going to become a staple throughout the course of the season. And with that, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hopefully you guys are all out there having a good one, joined by Reed Napper and Colin from O&O Sports, which, by the way, make sure you check out their socials in the like over on Twitter as well. That's where you can find them alongside their YouTube content. But yeah, take care and have a good rest of your day, guys.